I don't know how well this is gonna turn out, admittedly. Okay, wait. Is that the move? Is that the shot? Have we finally got the answers? I got the answers. Alright, cool. Long story short. Hey guys, my name is David Akinola. I am 21 years old. I am based in South London. What have I done? And I am currently working on a black indie video game title. Well, at least a demo, I should say. That's the big thing to preface that. I ain't going for it. Yeah, this is gonna be hot. This is gonna be a new experience for all of us, right? Okay, cool. So, NIXIE follows the adventures of Fiona. She encounters a spirit that can transform into a wedge-like hoverboard. It's called a spirit board in the game, but yeah. And she uses it to dive into people's mind and beat up their demons, essentially. She fights off their demons, frees their spirit, blah blah blah. And that's the premise of the game. Yeah, okay. I would say the core values of the game are like communication, unionizing, and the demonization of African spirituality, or traditional African spirituality, you could say. Yeah. NIXIE is a title that I want to say has been a dream of mine since I was 14. When I was 14, I really wanted to be a writer, right? That was like one of my big boy dreams, the big goals, right? I remember I wrote this story on Wattpad, right? I didn't plan to tell this story, but we can do it. All right, if you guys want it. I wrote this story on Wattpad, and it was basically just this really bad knockoff of Avatar: The Last Airbender, one of my favorite shows. And yeah, I remember you ever reread a story that you wrote when you were really young and go, okay, I know why you wrote this, I know why you said that, that's kind of embarrassing, etc, etc. That's kind of how I felt reading the story again. It wasn't the most comfortable feeling in the world, but we moved forward. Yeah, so after that's done, I show my friends and they don't want to read it. And one, the story's bad, right? But also, as in, they're not even gonna attempt to they weren't really interested in it, they weren't invested in it. And I was like, well, why? And then I realized something, and it was partially because I was listening to, Aaron Rabrudo on C-SPAN, right? Because 14 years old, this is around the time that Aaron, the Boondocks, has just been, when you're 14, you're like a sponge. I had hyperfixation, so I'm gonna be blunt. You're like a sponge of information, right? And then these things kind of come in, and it was like, okay, cool. Now my hyperfixation is the Boondocks, to be blunt. It's just that. And so I'm into it, and Aaron has this speech on C-SPAN. He's talking about image and the ability to communicate ideas, and that nobody reads anymore. We live in a generation where I'm not saying, the best way I can word it is, if one of my friends went up to me when I was 14, in retrospect, and they said, yeah, David, actually, I've been writing this book, you know what I mean? It's quite long, I think it's about 80 chapters. If you could read it for me, it'd be great. I'm not gonna read it either. Do you know what I mean? And it's not out of malice or anything. It's just, I thought about a lot of the things I consumed and the things I enjoyed, whether it's a show, visual novels, again, Ace Attorney, Zero Escape, Danganronpa, the list goes on, right? And the things I enjoyed or the things I consumed or was entertained by, right? I have to preface that one with Danganronpa. And these things, right? They're not just straight text. I bring this up a lot. If I were to write a black radical thought book based around my experiences within the UK and studying what have you, I would include illustrations. Not just, and some people be like, oh, that's childish, that's not how you're supposed to do it. But that's how you engage people. And I don't like the idea, this is a random sentiment, I don't like the idea, right, that in order to illustration or cartoons or cartoonist or whatever you want to call it, including that within literature, that inherently makes something really childish, or that means that it shouldn't be taken seriously. Because I don't know, if Malcolm X's autobiography was filled with beautiful anime-esque illustrations and pictures, are we gonna listen to it less? I mean, it doesn't make it make sense. Make it make sense for me. Do you know what I mean? Okay, cool. So yeah, I bring this up to communicate that, I learned at a very young age, hey, you can be the greatest writer in the world. If you don't know how to communicate points, no one's here for it. No one wants to listen to it. And even you're not here for it. So learn how to do that. And so I became a designer. And to be blunt, to be transparent, that's my job right now. Right now, my job is not a graphic designer, but my job is to design, essentially. Or in design, marketing, blah. and a big factor of why I got into that stuff was, again, I wanted to write. I wanted to be a writer. What the hell? That was the goal. You know what I mean? And so that's that philosophy is kind of bled into a lot of the things I'm making, right? And I've always been like, okay, I have stories that I want to tell. You know, the reason my channel name is The Storyteller isn't just because, oh man, it sounds cool, right? It was because when I was 14 years old, I decided, hey, I want to tell stories, you know? And not just any stories, you know? Like, I remember, I bring up this experience a lot, but like, when you're growing up black in the UK, right? You either have two avenues, generally speaking. Nowadays, I think you have a bit more, for the record. But me growing up black in the UK, you had two options. You could either watch football and see yourself represented through football, and if you weren't interested in football, well, you have American media. You have MTV, you have Disney Channel, you have all these different things. That's where you're gonna find the black representation. If you're not ready to watch football or EastEnders, sorry, you know what I mean? And so, because of that, that can be a very secular, isolating environment. And to be blunt, maybe it's not the healthiest environment to grow up in. I say all of that to say, I'm kind of also making NIXIE not just as something that I would love being 14 years old, what have you, but also just a thing that, say, an impressionable 14-year-old could look at and be like, oh, that looks really cool. I like that. I see myself in that. Because in every draft of this game, and it's gone for a lot of drafts, every draft of this game, the idea was, hey, I want black characters in this. I want this to be mostly black characters, because there aren't a lot of black video games, to be blunt. And I don't mean, and I made a video about this, but I don't mean like GTA 5 or San Andreas, and I love those games, right? Or the miscellaneous fighting game with the black guy that does capoeira, I forget what it's called. The black guy that does the break dancing fight style that like slaves did, right? I mean like actual like a predominantly black cast in a game that isn't just that. Because how many games do you know like that? Do you know what I mean? Like, name me a black puzzle game. You can't do it. Can't do it, can you? Do you know what I mean? And so that's part of the inspiration here. The idea is to kind of try to make something that I would have enjoyed as a kid, and black kids today, whether it's in London or across the globe, can relate to and enjoy in the form of a video game. And that's the big thing. The main character of the game is called Fiona, right? She went through the most redesigns. Everybody else was relatively simple. Fiona went through a lot. Primarily because one, the game was changing, and also because I wanted to make sure I got her right, because she's like a big key central character, and she's like the lens in which you see the entire story, to be blunt. You know, and when you're representing black women, it's very important to get black women involved in the creative process. And so something I did was, I got the character designed, like, and I sent it to everybody. I sent it to pretty much every black woman I said, hey, what do you think of this? What do you think of this? And I'd send like the two designs back to back. What people don't know about like the two designs, and you'll see it in the Kickstarter campaign, is that like the design of Fiona, where she doesn't have the green jacket and she has the scar, and the design of Fiona, where she does have it, those were two different designs. That was intended to be a redesign, right? Because I remember the original design was, you know, the one without that stuff, and then showed it, and they said, this looks a bit too revealing. And I was like, okay, cool. We'll redesign that. They said, yeah, she should look stronger. She should like look more like, if she's gonna be an action hero, she should look more involved, like more appropriate for the role. I was like, okay, cool, that makes sense. I don't want to pull like a Revy kind of Yoko situation. So I was like, cool. And the character was redesigned. And now that made some people happy. And it was like, okay, cool, great. Then I was told, she looks a bit too masculine. I would like for her to look a bit more feminine. And because of that, Fiona is kind of a very interesting character. She went through so many redesigns and ways in which I could make it so, you know, she didn't look too far. Because ultimately, you don't want to create when you're designing black women, you don't want to create a character that's like for black boys, you know what I mean, or black men or whatever. You want to be able to, ideally, I'd want a situation where a black woman could see like Fiona and be like, oh, she looks cool. Like, I want to play that, you know what I mean? Like, I know that black cosplayers go through this a lot, but they very limited options. partially because of the fan bases and what have you, but very limited options in where you can actually cosplay as. And I want to be able to provide more of that. And again, the big thing, and this did make me really happy, the big thing that people communicated when they were talking about the trailer, they were like, okay, cool. This looks like the world ends with you. And that made me happy because I was like, yeah, that was a big inspiration for the game. For the record, the inspirations for the game are kind of the world ends with you, Ghost Trick, and Sonic Riders, which sounds like a weird amalgamation of inspirations. I'll actually start with Sonic Riders. The camera's on. Hello? Hello? Okay, cool. Yeah. So again, something a lot of people communicated in their reactions to the trailer, which also thank you guys so much. I had been sitting on that for a while. I had no idea whether it was any good. You look at like assets and like things in your game and just like, you sit on them for so long, you forget they're good. And so getting that reaction was really good for me because it was like, okay, it's like good. People like it. I didn't waste my time. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, the influences, a lot of things people caught on to, The World Ends With You, Ghost Trick, Sonic Riders. Those are the key influences for the game in terms of like, on a video game standpoint. And, you know, like in terms of media, that's more like, let's say television focused or film focused. I think you guys can reach like general conclusions about the inspiration for some things. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah. So like, okay, we can even start with Sonic Riders because that might be the most, like, that might be the most foreign one, I guess. Sonic, my favorite thing about Sonic is the speed and the style, to be blunt. To me, that has always captured like what has made Sonic fun for me. Sonic Riders, okay, so to give like an example, here's like a really, another personal story. I remember my dad used to take us to Nigeria, right? And he wouldn't want to take the PS3 because the PS3 was too expensive. So I could only take the PS2. And I would take the PS2 and I just remember playing endless amounts of Sonic Riders. I got so good at the game. And it's such a rewarding trick system to get good at and it's so complicated, etc, etc. Now I understand how that's alienating for a bunch of people. I completely understand that. And my goal isn't to alienate people with some really, I want it to be complex, but like, I'm not gonna try and alienate people with this like crazy trick system. Again, I'm using sprites, keep that in mind. But like, the idea of riding a skateboard, maintaining momentum, using tricks to kind of make your moves get stronger, that's kind of the idea. And it's gonna be really, I think it's gonna be really cool. That's kind of the idea. The skateboard that Fiona rides is actually a reference to an old 1920s constructivism, the art movement. 1920s Soviet art movement. It was called Beat the Whites with the Red Wedge. And that's, you can see, because I did those who don't know, I did the graphic design, I did the UI design for the game. You can see it throughout the UI, the red star, the red wedge. I wonder what politics this guy subscribes to. Yeah, you know, yeah, that's that. And also, like, it's based on my skateboard, you know? So, like, I love skateboarding, for the record. It's one of my favorite things. Obviously, mine's a bit, like, worn at the edges, right? I've been doing it a bit too much. But, like, yeah, no, I love skateboarding. It's one of my favorite things. And so, like, to be able to kind of represent that, you know, within my game, again, speaks to this idea that I want to make a game that I would have fell in love with at 14. If anything has skateboarding, I think it's really cool, to be blunt. And this is hoverboarding. And it's just, yeah, I think it's really cool. And the biggest thing with game development for me is make a game that's fun. And then everything else will come later. Do you know what I mean? So that's kind of where I've been at with that, I guess. Similar situation, it's like about spirits, and it has a gameplay gimmick. It's really cool. The World Ends With You has such a rich and interesting combat system, right? Like where it's all based on pins and you can switch them out, and you also have to get like, you have to kind of get in sync with your partner character. And when you do that, your moves get stronger and you can perform more combos. I love that. Do you know what I mean? And so the idea was to kind of flip that and turn it into, okay, form stronger unions with people. You get stronger pins, you get stronger attacks, you level them up. And so that was like a big thing for me. And I was like, this is so cool. And there's no game on the market that's like The World Ends With You. There's none. There's none. Even I love Neo. Neo is a great game. It's different. And not like, and it tries its hardest, for the record. It tries. But it's still different to me. And I don't think that's bad. It's not a knock on Neo, but I'm just, I'm communicating the point. I'm not trying to knock Neo, please. Yeah. And one of the biggest, I remember I asked a friend to play The World Ends With You because it's my favorite game of all time, right? And he was like, yeah, I think this is really cool, but I don't like the combat because clicky clacky on the touch screen, Fruit Ninja. You know what I mean? And sadly, I see his point. I love it, but like the whole touch screen, like patting on the screen like that, for some people, that's not it. That's not the move. They don't like that. And I understand that. For me, I really enjoyed it. So the idea was to kind of take that gameplay style and make it more interesting, to be blunt, or like make it more palatable for using a controller, So take the ideas of Neo, where you kind of relegate each move to a button press, but put that in a sprite-based game. And so that's kind of the idea. And so you'll have pins, you can use your attacks, you can use tricks. I'll show some illustrations on screen, but yeah, and that's really cool. That's kind of the big premise of the game. That's the idea. I would love to tell you like more development stories, right? Behind the scenes. Because there's a bunch of characters I could tell you about, like, oh yeah, I've made the backgrounds blue to represent X, Y, and Z. And sometimes it's just, I think this would be really cool. But, or like just history and memories working with some of the people on the team. Like LJ, you guys must be familiar with LJ. Incredible artist, has saved my bacon so many times. Just a great guy overall. Monte was the first person I'd ever commissioned ever. What's it called? Cold Dre. I remember hearing his Bomb Cyberfunk remixes like a year ago, and I said, this guy is insane. He's insanely good. You know what I mean? Like so much. There's so many stories I could tell about developments, how things changed, but I want to save. I think that's one of the pledge tiers. I'm gonna save that for probably the art book if that gets made, perhaps. There's so much to say, so much to talk about. If you are remotely interested in this game, please pledge, give it a shout out, do what you have to do. It would be really cool. I'm not saying it's my life's work, but it definitely is something that I've been working on for a long amount of time without getting into all the nitty-gritty details. I remember in uni, like, I would get student finance and I'd just drop it on the game. I'd be like, yeah, I need character art, I need sprites, I need this, I need that. And so a majority of the visual novel aspect is done. Because to be blunt, I just wanted to make a visual novel. But with time that evolved into, I want a visual novel, but I want a little bit more and a visual novel, if that makes sense. Because most of my favorite visual novels, they have an extra gimmick. The World Ends With You is it's not a visual novel, so I'm gonna throw that in the bin. But Ghost Trick, right? It's a visual novel, but it has like the Ghost Powers gimmick. That's it. Dura Escape. It's a pure visual novel, but you escape rooms. You interact with things in the room. That's it. And stuff like that. And those are my favorite types. So to get something like that, to reach that sort of point, that's where the Kickstarter comes in. And that's kind of the idea. If you believe in the idea, if you like the vision, if you've liked anything I've made in the past, please consider supporting. It would mean the world to me. Yeah, I guess. I wish I could say more, but I think I'm going to end it here. Guys, it has been so real. Thank you so much. Also, tell me if you want to see more videos in this style, generally speaking. I actually kind of like the setup here. It looks really nice. Yeah. Thank you, guys. It's been real. Take care. Peace.